I know I'm going to get some backlash for this video, but in my perspective, it is good to question your political leaders, even the ones that you support. And I don't consider that disloyalty. I consider it being an American. Now, I've supported a lot of Trump's policies during this term. I actually had a lot of bad comments his last term. And I believe that Secretary Rollins is probably one of the best agricultural secretaries we've seen in a very long time. And I especially support their policies that make the American farmer stronger, that help build up the American agricultural and rural communities. But guys, let me tell you something. This magic beef deal is not magic at all, and it is not America first. Now, Trump says it's going to lower beef prices. And we're going to discuss how big this deal would actually have to be to lower beef prices. And that's a good thing for American consumers. Only in the short term, though. In the long term, this is not a good thing for anybody. This is the same short-term import trick that we saw with eggs earlier in the year. And like I said, it doesn't solve the problem. By the way, guys, keep an eye on avian flu. It is kicking up this fall. I think we're going to run into another shortage this winter. In a recent interview, Trump said that he had worked his magic on a beef deal to lower beef prices in the United States, sending beef prices plummeting just last week. He didn't put out any documents. He didn't tell anybody what that deal was. He just threw the phrase out there. But it came with some rather interesting timing that can tell us what exactly to expect here. Last winter, like I said, Trump made this magic egg deal. And what they ended up doing was importing eggs from places like Turkey into Georgia by the hundreds of thousands to reduce the prices of eggs to consumers on the market. And I agree that consumers are hurting right now. Prices are way too high. But importing eggs cost the American people a huge opportunity that could have given the U.S. consumer a lot more choice in where their food comes from. And that's what we're seeing here in this new magic beef deal. And why I have a message to the president. Pay attention to this, Mr. President, because this is a video on simple economics that can truly make America great again. I hope he does watch the video. Like I said, my disagreement with this does not mean that overall I don't like the things that they've been doing. So here's what we know. Okay, so recently President Trump met with Argentina's libertarian president, who I like him a lot. I was excited when he got elected in Argentina. Around that same time, he also spoke on the phone with Brazil's president. And there's been talk of conversations of high-level individuals who are negotiating trade between those countries, all happening around the same time. Now, for those of you who don't know this, both Argentina and Brazil are major exporters of beef around the world, particularly to China. Argentina ships a lot of beef to China. Both of these countries are looking to expand trade around the world as much as they possibly can. Brazil has way more Amazon forest to cut down. And I think it's important to note that both of these meetings happened within days of each other and within a day or two of Trump saying, we've reached a magic deal. Now that timing obviously has a lot of analysts and ranchers talking about what that magic beef deal is. And what that magic beef deal has nothing to do with Americans or Americans' interests, but everything to do with South American interests. And I'm not saying that increasing trade with those countries is a bad thing necessarily. I mean, what we were seeing right now is a military buildup on the border of Venezuela. Brazil would be a closer partner than Argentina. Argentina is pretty far away if anything were to happen with Venezuela. There is a global order, a global control order that's been trying to take over. And so the more people you can pull away from doing business with China, who's apparently our adversary, the better off we are. I don't necessarily disagree with everything that they're doing there. But I also believe that when it comes to the food security of the United States, when it comes to putting America first, what that truly means is a very different tactic. One that would give you as a consumer way more choice on where your food comes from. It would eventually roll prices down into a free market system where it's not controlled by a bunch of commodity traders. It would remove the power of Tyson and JBS from our food supply, which makes it better in the long term for ranchers. And that's the problem with my solution, is because my solution puts Americans first. It doesn't put big ag first. This magic beef deal would basically mean more food power to the largest meat packers in the world. I mean, think about it. JBS is Brazil's largest meat exporter. Tyson also exports from these countries. This is not a pro-American move, this is a corporate globalization move. Yes, it would temporarily reduce beef prices at the grocery store. It would also, frankly, probably make it even harder for a lot of America's ranchers to recover from the current situation that they are in. It would consolidate control and power over our global food supply. I had a problem when we were back in COVID and they were trying to figure out how to get food back out to the public. During that time, you had small farmers across this country opening up farm stands on their properties, just trying to get food out to consumers. People were responding. They were going to the farms, directly to the farms, to buy their food. And this actually was a trend that carried on for a couple years after COVID before people forgot about it and started going back to the grocery store again. But because of those resources, what we actually started to see was a recognition of food security, what was necessary to make sure that our country was food secure in a type of situation like a pandemic. And small American farmers were reacting in real time. You saw it all across this country. So what did they do? They pulled in Tyson, they pulled in JBS into a White House meeting to figure out what they needed to do to get the food supply back on track. And that was an important move, because if they didn't do that, and the situation continued, where do you think consumers would be buying most of their food from today? If they weren't able to resupply those grocery stores, it would have completely changed the dynamics of how consumers purchase their groceries in the United States of America. That's a big problem to those big global corporate entities. The biggest problem with beef prices in the United States is the regulatory box out of small producers. These are the people who could help balance the market in these times if they were just able to locally do so. Now you're probably thinking, Charlie, you've got cows, and so it's gonna make you mad if beef prices fall. In actuality, I auctioned off most of our cows last summer. And I did that because, yeah, beef prices were high, I was gonna get the most for them. But to be honest with you, I couldn't take my cows into a processor and have them processed for meat for sale because they had horns, and nobody around here will take horned animals. Ironically, the people who bid on my animals at auction were the slaughterhouses that I couldn't take them to myself. But this is how our regulatory system works. It puts the power in the hands of a few, and the rest of us are just meant to deal with it. So right now, I only have a few cows that are for my own family's self-sufficiency. We've reinvested in other things. We've reinvested in pork. We have about 30 hogs on our property right now. But for a farmer, for somebody like me to invest and invest in a way that I could take that pork directly to the consumer, right now I can only offer herd shares. In order for me to get just a meat handler's license, and this is one of those things, I was having a conversation with a farmer the other day about this. In order to have a meat handler's license, well, we have to have freezers on our property that have temperature controls and temperature controls on the outside, has to be in a rodent-free environment, has to be, I mean, there's a lot of things involved. It doesn't sound like much to most of you, but unless you want a government inspector to be coming into your house to inspect a freezer sitting in your living room, you've got to figure out another way that you can do it. And I've seen some people who just put a freezer out in their garage with a mousetrap next to it, perfectly fine. But for us, what we'd have to do is put in another building. To do that, we're looking at about a $20,000 investment just to get a meat handler's license. Now, here's the funny thing about that, is that most of the people required to have a meat handler's license around here never actually bring the meat back to their property. What happens is they take the animal to a licensed facility, state, USDA, whoever it might be, and then they pick it up in coolers and deliver it directly to their buyer, and their buyer puts it in their freezer. Their buyer is responsible for maintaining the meat that they purchased off of them. That's how it works in most places in this country. Most people who process animals for local sales of beef, pork, you name it, they don't actually ever handle the meat other than that transportation. But in order to transport the meat, you've got to have a license. In order to sell the meat to a consumer, you've got to have the license, even if they're going to the licensed facility to pick it up. And to have a license, you've got to have the proper infrastructure on your farm. That's a capital investment. Now, think about it this way. It's not easy to get money these days. Certain grant programs have made it easy for some producers. I don't fit the profile of that. But those grant programs aren't exactly great either. I don't think that we should have to rely on the government grant system to provide us with money we need to be able to meet their regulations to sell directly to our neighbor. That's a bit ridiculous if you ask me. And the problem with grants and subsidies is that you put that control of who is going to be able to grow, who is going to be able to invest in the hands of the government. Now that's not really a smart idea. So what you need is you need an incentive for farms to be able to invest into their own market, into their own operations. When beef prices are high, like they are right now, they also raise the prices of pork, they raise the prices of chicken, it raises the cost of protein. But and costs being high are not great for the consumer. Overall, it's not great for the industry for it to remain that way for an extended period of time. But what it also does is it spurs investment. So a farmer can suddenly look at the situation and say, now if I can convince a private investor, or I can somehow come up with the loan dollars, a short-term loan, to be able to put a facility on my property with the prices that they are right now, I should be able to at least pay down that facility enough to refinance it in a couple years for some lower payments as the market corrects. The higher prices are incentivizing investments from American farmers. Without that incentive, without that ability to be able to pay down these expensive things that we have to put into our properties in order to get, I mean, it's stupid. It's really stupid. You shouldn't have to have all that for a meat handler's license. I mean, you should maybe do tiers. You know, if you take the meat home and you get caught, you get fined. I don't know, but there's got to be a better way to do this. Deregulation is the necessary thing here. But because prices are high, it might hurt the consumer for a little bit, but it's going to drive that investment from local farmers that is necessary to diversify our food supply and make our country more food secure for the next pandemic, the next global war, whatever's coming. We all know something's always coming. That is how you make America great again, is by driving investment, by driving local farmers and ranchers to actually be put in a situation where they can make the numbers work. And once those numbers work, once that investment is made, suddenly you'll have a supply buildup. And as that supply builds up, you'll start to see prices come back down. This is a natural reaction to a free market. If you don't have free markets, what do you have? You have government handouts, government subsidies, complete control over the market because there's no other way to make it possibly work. And you have corporate consolidation because you're importing a bunch of things to manipulate market prices. That doesn't work. It doesn't work for the consumer. The consumer ultimately does not want that much control over the food that's going on their plate. They want to be able to go out and make that choice. They would love to buy from local farms. I know lots of farms with lots of cows who would love to sell their beef locally, who would love to, but they can't because of these stupid regulations. These regulations that make absolutely no sense, as I've described in this video. The propaganda from big media is helping a lot of consumers just kind of accept these magic deals with excitement, but they're not really explaining to people the truth. What you hear is that the U.S. cow herd is now the smallest that it's been since the 1970s. We've heard that for several years. You continue to see beef prices hit new all-time highs. We've seen that for several years. Beef demand and consumption continues to grow, even though our beef herd is shrinking. But despite all of this news about the U.S. beef industry, imports have gone up 43%. That's all during the same time. We've imported more and more beef, cheap beef from South America. These companies are banking on the beef prices in the US going up versus what they're able to buy it for and ship it into the country. During the time that we have seen imports go up 43%, we've seen the price for consumer go up 42%. It's like side by side, guys. My point is that if importing beef actually did anything, then we'd see lower prices in the market. But we don't, because what we see is the American farmer, the American rancher still struggling, and we see Tyson, JBS, these big global conglomerates making more and more money by importing. Nothing is stabilizing the market enough for local farms and ranchers to actually put the investment in, to build on it. And then on top of that, you have these states that are constantly canceling grazing leases, turning over forest land to conservation uses, which I know Rollins has fixed, and I am grateful for that. But there's been way too many complications in the market to entice farmers and ranchers to be able to expand. There's been water resource issues across the United States. Yes, we've had droughts, but then we've also had data centers sucking up the water. But every pound of imported beef is taking away opportunity from small farms and ranchers from being able to grow their business, being able to take the risk of investment or seek investment from other people to help make that happen. I've had a hard time with that because people think, well, this market is completely unstable. If we give you that money, how you can pay it back? The reason why this market is unstable is because it's constantly being manipulated by people importing large amounts of beef, driving down the beef prices before we actually have time to implement a plan to invest and grow. But ultimately, what is best for America is for farmers and ranchers to invest and grow. It might hurt the consumer short term, but if you put this logic in place back in COVID, which was back in 2019, we would already be there today. We wouldn't be seeing these high prices today. The mistakes that were made during COVID are the reason why we have high prices today. The investments, you should have let the food prices go up. You should have let the local farmers invest into the food system, invest into their marketing plans. Quit supporting these big corporate conglomerates and actually look at what that would have done. It would have bolstered rural economies across this country. These are mistakes that have been played out again and again and again, and they've created the same situation again and again and again. It's very poor economics. We've gone from a time frame where 10% of the beef that we ate was imported. Now we're looking at 22%. Billions of pounds of beef that you guys eat every year is imported from South America, and we just made a magic deal to increase it. At least that's what the rumor mill has. If that's correct, it's wrong. There have been a lot of opportunities to drive down beef prices. The Prime Act is a great opportunity that's been sitting out there for a very long time. If they implemented the Prime Act, you would be able to buy a lot of local meats. Custom processors are actually regulated by federal law. New Hampshire, they have plenty of cows in New Hampshire, but they can't sell them. The farmers can't sell them locally. New Hampshire doesn't have any state-operated facilities, so they have to completely go off of federal regulations, which is a whole other tier for farmers, ranchers, and processors. So New Hampshire this year has actually been considering a bill where they would allow in-state sales direct from farmer to consumer from custom processors. But the problem is, because these aren't state-regulated facilities, they're federal-regulated facilities, it would go against federal law. So they really can't do it. They've considered it, they've looked at the implications of it, and it's caused kind of an uproar. It's kind of like raw milk. The reason why a lot of farmers want to be able to sell raw milk is because they want the public to be able to buy directly from them. And they're constantly bringing up reasons why we shouldn't be drinking raw milk, regardless of the fact that it does have good health benefits to you. They'll say, well, raw milk makes up 30% of the US recalls for milk. But that also means that the other 70% is coming from the pasteurized crap you buy at the store. If you deregulated with things like the Prime Act, if you did away with some of these stupid licensing requirements to get a meat handler's license, talk to your states, talk to your state agricultural departments, your state agricultural secretaries, and say, hey, look, we need to unlock the food supply. We've had it on lockdown. Small farmers have too many regulatory hurdles to get to the point where they can sell to the consumer. We need to back that up a little bit. The reality of some of these smaller processing facilities is that they don't have the same sanitation issues that a facility processing thousands of animals a day does. Let's unlock this a little bit. Let's make it a little bit easier to get food to consumers. And what you're going to see is local farmers and ranchers start investing in their properties. They're going to start investing in their herd sizes. They're going to start filling the needs of the food gap. The only reason why they don't right now is because they're constantly afraid of going to jail. Just last month, you had, just a farm membership program where you have to pay to be a member of the farm's private sales entity, get pulled into court in Virginia. You have situations like Amos Miller. Why would any farmer want to take the risk to sell to you if they're constantly being hit for selling food to their neighbor? It's never going to happen, folks. You want to fix the food supply issue in the United States, you deregulate it. We're Americans, guys. We don't need our food shipped here from halfway around the world. We've got plenty of resources in the United States. But I'm going to be honest with you. This system isn't broken by accident. The smaller producers aren't boxed in by accident. It is done on purpose, and they spend a lot of money to keep it that way. Their lobbyists are constantly flooding Washington, D.C. to keep it that way. And by importing beef, dropping beef prices, they'll actually make more money and they'll be able to maintain control over the industry. Because what is happening right now is that you actually do see smaller farmers starting to pop up saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to start raising beef. I'm going to invest in some infrastructure, some fencing to start raising beef. I'm going to figure out a way to get a meat handler's license. I'm going to put in a store. I have been working towards this. Put in a store on my property, a place where I can sell beef directly and where I can store it and get my licensing. Not all of that goes away. All of that investment, all of that thought, all of that entrepreneurship goes away the second you import billions of pounds of beef from South America. The second you import hundreds of thousands of eggs from Turkey. And all of our American dollars, they go to those countries as well because we're buying their products. We're not producing. We're buying somebody else's production. The second our production goes down, well, it's unsustainable. We would become an unsustainable country. We should be exporting to all these places. But like I said, guys, if local farmers could start selling directly to the consumer, I mean, some of these big corporations would lose market share overnight. And that's what they're afraid of. If prices stay high and the investments are made from American producers, investments that would help them go straight to the consumer, remove the middle guy, because the price is right? The price is right now. That would ultimately give the consumer way too much flexibility on where they can get their food from. They'd give them way too much choice. We can't allow that to happen. We can't allow the American people to choose where their food comes from. And so they're the ones that are pushing this thing. And they're pushing it hard. And the thought process is, well, if I can lower the prices for the Americans, I'm doing a good thing for America. No, you're not. You aren't bolstering rural economies. You aren't growing entrepreneurship and agriculture. Like I said, I agree with most things that this administration has done. But this is the second time I've seen this in a year. And there is one thing I can warn against. It is market manipulation of prices through imports. This is kind of a second slap in the face, considering we just bailed out Argentina several weeks ago, and then Argentina turns around and sells a bunch of soybeans to China, taking away the market from American farmers when we're trying to negotiate hardball with China. These deals aren't working. Put America first. Put American farmers first. Argentina means nothing to me if they're going to be stealing all of our business. Stealing our business, not just from overseas, but now from our neighbors. Think about it.